At the party, my brother said that he had paid the rent for my sister's apartment 3 months ago. She laughed. Later, she got sick, changed, and gave the apartment back. He silently accepted and stayed by her side. The evening began normally. People gathered, laughed, talked loudly, put glasses on the tables, turned on the lights, and turned on the music. Everything looked like another ordinary party that my sister threw. She always knew how to organize celebrations where a bunch of different people gathered: friends, colleagues, relatives, and acquaintances. The atmosphere was both loud and warm and cozy, like in a home where everyone knew their place and could take a break from everyday life. But I came that evening with an inner excitement that did not give me peace. It seemed that everyone was expecting something special. My sister, dressed in a new dress, talked lively, laughed, and looked radiant and confident. I looked at her and thought, here she is, my sister, who has always been the center of attention. And I am just a spectator. We didn't always get along before. Our relationship was difficult, but today I wanted to show her and everyone else that I could do something important. Over the past few months, I have been working harder than ever. It has not been easy: delays at work, friends' refusals to meet, lack of free time. But I believed that every hryvnia, every hour, all this brings me closer to my goal. And so, 3 months ago, I paid the rent for the apartment where my sister and her family live. It was not just a gift. It was my way of saying, I care. I am here. I help. I didn't plan to shout about it from every corner, but this evening I decided to tell everyone. Maybe so that they would see that I am more than just a brother, that I can be a support. When the music died down a bit, I raised my glass, attracted the attention of the audience, and briefly told them about my gift. My sister looked at me with surprise at first, and then she laughed. Her laugh was loud and a little ironic when she said, "Come on, you pay for another year." These words sounded like a joke, but I felt something more in them: distrust, rejection, but at the same time a certain challenge. Everyone was looking at me, their eyes shining. Someone smiled, someone shook their heads, and I stood there, feeling that this was just the beginning of something big. The evening continued, but I felt that now I needed to do even more. Not just give money, but build relationships, prove that this gift was not an accident. That I could be the one who supports, and not just the one who pays the bills. It was difficult, but I was ready. Over time, the conversations turned to the topics of life, work, dreams. I listened to my sister, her friends, understanding that everyone has their own difficulties, their own fears and hopes. And in this diversity I saw an opportunity to change not only the situation, but also myself. Perhaps this party would be the beginning of something new. The night smoothly turned into morning. The guests slowly dispersed. I was left alone with my thoughts. No longer just a brother who pays for the apartment, but a person who seeks to be heard, understood. A sense of responsibility imposed new obligations: to my sister, to myself, to everything I had started. The following days brought new challenges. I met with my sister to discuss plans. She was surprised and at the same time grateful. We agreed that this would be the beginning of a new stage. My actions would not go unnoticed. I would have to prove it again and again. Thus ended the first chapter of our story. And although it was only the beginning, I already felt that everything was changing. Because sometimes a simple act can be the reason for a big change. And I was ready to go this way to the end. The days after the party flew by quickly. At first, it seemed that nothing would change, everything would remain as it was. But it was a mistake. The next morning, I felt that my help had begun to work. My sister called and suggested that we meet. She wanted to talk not just about money or rent, but about life. It was unexpected, but I did not refuse the meeting, she admitted. That after the party she began to look at me differently. My decision to pay for the apartment was a sign for her that I was ready to support them not only with words, but also with deeds. It brought us closer together, relieved the tension that we had long carried between us. She apologized for her joke at the party, explained that at the time she did not know how to perceive my act. We talked for hours. I told her about how I had been working in recent months, what difficulties I had experienced, how much effort I had put into it. She, in turn, opened up to me, shared her experiences and fears. It turned out that they also had money problems, but they were afraid to burden me. This conversation was a turning point. From now on, I was not just a brother who paid the rent. I became a partner, a friend, a person who could help. We agreed to support each other openly and honestly. We spent the next few weeks planning how to improve their lives. My sister suggested that I help them find a job for her husband, because he had lost his past. I found several options, helped him write a resume, even advised him on how to behave at interviews. This gave results. A month later he received his first offer. In parallel, I continued to work overtime so that I could not only pay for the apartment, but also help with other needs. I remembered how my mother used to say that I was just the one who pays. Now I wanted to prove that it was more. My mother also changed. She became more attentive, began to support me. She no longer talked about children's money, but acknowledged my responsibility and desire to do better. Life was getting better. We began to get together more often. Dinners, walks together, conversations. All this created a sense of family that was missing before. However, life makes its adjustments. One evening, my sister called me with an anxious voice. They had a serious problem: unexpected debts for utilities that they could not pay. This threatened to cut off electricity and water. I did not hesitate to take on this problem. I worked late into the night, again, looking for ways to help. In the end, I managed to agree on a debt installment plan and pay the first installment. My sister was grateful, but I saw fatigue and anxiety in her eyes. I realized that this was not the end of the difficulties, but the beginning of serious trials. But I was ready. Now we are no longer just a family struggling to survive. We are a team ready to support each other in any situation, and so our journey continued, with ups and downs, but always with the faith that together we would overcome any obstacles. After settling the debts, everything seemed to calm down a little. The apartment remained in order, the electricity was not turned off, the water was flowing. But that call left me with the feeling that the peace was temporary. And I was not mistaken. When it seems that the storm has passed, it is often just a lull before the next wave. The following weeks were full of small troubles. My sister and her husband's refrigerator broke, then the internet disappeared, then a strange demand came to pay for old utility bills that had previously seemed to have been closed. And each of these small moments required time, money, and effort. They turned to me, and I helped. Because I could no longer do otherwise. At the same time, I began to notice that my own affairs were beginning to sag. I became less attentive at work. One project that I had been preparing for over a month suddenly fell through because I had missed an important deadline. The manager called me in for a conversation, gave me a second chance, but it was clear in his voice: one more puncture, and there would be no more chances. I nodded silently, left, and for the first time thought about how deeply I had already become involved in other people's problems, although I no longer perceived them as other people's. This was my sister, my family. But still, my life seemed to begin to live in parallel with theirs. My days began and ended not with my affairs, but with theirs. One evening I came home and just sat in the dark. I didn't have the strength to even undress. My phone was constantly flashing with messages. My sister was asking if I could help with buying a new washing machine because the old one had burned down. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to. I just didn't know how. There was a little money left on the card until the end of the month, and my salary wasn't due for another 10 days. I took out my calculator and started counting. Another minus, another compromise. I decided that I could pay part of it now and the rest after my salary. I told her about it in the morning, and she was grateful. And I continued to live at a pace where all my actions were about them. Everything changed one morning. Call. Mom. Usually she called at lunchtime or in the evening. But this time early in the morning. Her voice was worried, anxious. She said that she had seen her sister at the market, but she looked exhausted and upset. She asked if they were okay. I couldn't say anything because I didn't know. The last time we'd seen each other was a week ago, and she looked, as always, tired but grateful. But my mother sensed something. And mothers are rarely wrong. I packed up and went to see them. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. I rang the phone, but to no avail. I was already starting to get worried when the door opened. My sister came out. She really didn't look very good. Tired, her eyes were red, and there were traces of tears on her cheeks. She silently invited me inside. I went in. My husband was sitting on the couch with a laptop on his lap. The silence in the apartment was heavy. I sat down opposite him and asked what had happened. They were silent. Then she began to speak. Slowly, through force. She said that all this help, all this care that I give them, has become a burden for her, not a relief. She feels helpless. She says that she has lost her sense of her own weight in this world. She feels like she is living off someone else's resources, and it is destroying her. I kept quiet. I did not expect to hear something like that. I just wanted to help. But now she says that it is suffocating her. That every money transfer I make, every piece of advice I give is a reminder of her powerlessness. I sat and listened as my desire to do good turned into a painful trap. Her husband added that he felt like a third party. That my role in their lives had become too big. That he could not accept the fact that someone else was providing for his family. He said this not with anger, but with sadness. He also wanted to be useful, strong, and in charge. And he became an observer. I did not know what to say. I was not scolded. I was not asked to stop. But they showed me that even the best intentions can create a shadow that covers everything. I got up and left. Silently. No offense, no explanations. I just understood, you need to give them space. Give them a chance to become themselves. At home, I sat by the window for a long time. There was no anger. There was silence. Calm, empty. The silence that comes when you've done everything you could and there's nothing more to prove, but it wasn't the end yet. Just a new turn. And I felt something even stronger would happen next. After that conversation, I tried to stay away. I didn't write, I didn't call, I didn't offer help. It was easier to remain silent than to hear once again that my concern made them feel guilty. I went back to my business. It became quiet at home. The phone was silent. Strangely, but instead of relief, I felt emptiness. As if something big, complex, and heavy that I had been carrying for a long time suddenly disappeared, and the burden of having nothing more to carry remained. At work, it also got better. I went back to deadlines, projects, morning meetings. My boss praised me for my initiative. My colleagues started asking me what had happened to me. They said I had grown up in a week. I just smiled. I realized that at some point I had stopped living my life and was finally returning to it, but inner peace did not come. It felt as if someone had left the door ajar and was blowing. I had no anger at them. I had no resentment. But there was a question: what next? Because family is not a temporary role, it is not a favor. And if I have invested so much, can I just leave? Forget it. Several weeks passed. I did not call them. They did not call me either. My mother tried to ask why I had disappeared, but I avoided direct answers. I said, "A lot of work, it's okay, I will tell you later." She understood, but did not insist. One day a letter came to my mailbox. Not a message, not an SMS, but a paper letter in an envelope. My sister's handwriting. She wrote that she understood why I had left. She thanked me for everything I had done. She asked me not to be offended. She said that she and her husband had decided to change everything, and they needed time to do this. They wanted to prove that they could do it themselves. But if I ever find myself in trouble, they will be there for me. I reread that letter several times. There was something different in each sentence: shame, gratitude, and determination. I put it in a drawer, didn't reply. I just kept it as a memory of something important. Time passed. Months. Then almost a year. We only saw each other at family events, birthdays, holidays. We spoke politely, discreetly. Without reproaches, without mentioning the past. As if everything was in another life. I lived on a new project, a new promotion. I rented a bigger apartment, changed cars, traveled. Sometimes I thought about them, but without anxiety. Just as about a part of myself that had broken away. Everything changed again in 1 minute. My mother called. Her voice was trembling. She said that her sister had been hospitalized. As if something was wrong with her heart. Her husband was with her, but he asked his mother to warn me. I dropped everything: work, meetings, plans. I arrived at the hospital. I waited outside the doctor's office until the doctor came out. He said that the attack was caused by severe nervous exhaustion, stress, anxiety, lack of sleep, malnutrition. Everything had accumulated. And now the body said, enough. I was allowed into the ward. She lay, pale, within 4. She smiled when she saw me. I sat down next to her. We were silent for a long time. And then she said, "We thought we could handle it. But we couldn't." I didn't blame her. I didn't ask why. I didn't say, "I told you so." I just took her hand and silently stayed by her side. A few days later she was transferred home. I helped organize everything she needed: medicine, groceries, everyday life. They didn't ask. But this time I didn't wait for an invitation. I just did it. Because I knew that now was not the time for pride or resentment. My sister's husband changed. He became calmer, more open. We cooked together, cleaned together. Sometimes we talked. He admitted that this year was a real test for him. They really tried. But life doesn't always allow you to win the first time. I came back into their lives. But differently. Without the role of a savior, without financial patronage. Just as a part of the family that didn't disappear at a difficult moment. Gradually, everything began to improve. She was getting better. He found a stable job. Mom came to visit them more often. The atmosphere changed. There was no longer that shadow that lay between us. It felt like we were really together, but I felt that this was not the end yet. Something else was ahead. And this time, something I didn't expect. Everything became quieter, slower, more organized. After the conversations and the first steps towards each other, the previous tension disappeared. No one raised their voices anymore, no one threw words that could offend. Everything that had looked like a war a few months ago now looked more like a truce. Not complete trust, but not indifference either. All parties seemed to have agreed silently, without signatures or handshakes. Everyone did their own thing, but with thoughts of others. My sister changed the rhythm of her life. After her illness, she seemed to emerge from the darkness and began to pay close attention to her own health. She spent more time at home, reading, listening to calm melodies, and doing morning exercises. Her husband took on some of the worries. He cooked, cleaned, and helped with documents. Their apartment was no longer just a space, it became a center of peace. I came to them less often, but every time I saw the atmosphere change. And not because I was no longer giving anything, but because they were starting to cope on their own. I no longer counted on recognition or gratitude. I simply reduced my presence. It wasn't a gesture of resentment, it was an attempt to give them complete freedom. Surprisingly, after that, we seemed to become closer. Not through words, but through simple understanding. Mom sometimes said that the family finally began to breathe as a whole. I just nodded, because I didn't want to add anything extra. Something remained inside that didn't give me complete peace. The feeling that something wasn't finished yet. Several weeks passed. An evening came that would remain in my memory forever. The meeting took place at my mother's house. My sister and her husband arrived unexpectedly. Their faces were serious, the silence was long. They held a folder, and in their eyes you could read something that no one could say out loud without trembling. It turned out that during the illness a rare genetic disorder was discovered that slowly but relentlessly destroys the nervous system. This is not just fatigue or stress. This is not something that can be cured with pills. They silently handed over the documents in which everything was written down. The first minutes after reading it passed in complete silence. The world seemed to have stopped. Everything that had previously seemed important, money, insults, help, instantly lost its meaning. Only this new truth remained. Unchangeable. Final. She didn't scream, she didn't ask. She just was. Along with the medical records, there were other documents. My sister and her husband decided to give me the apartment they lived in. The same one I had once paid rent for. They thought it was fair. Not as compensation. Not as gratitude. But as a gesture that was meant to close the circle. They didn't want to ask for anything more, but they couldn't keep quiet either. I took the documents in my hands, looked through everything from beginning to end. There was no resentment, no pride. There was only fatigue and clarity. After that, I left everything on the table, sat down next to them, and just stayed silently. No questions. No gestures. Acceptance didn't require words. In the following days, I changed my rhythm. I started spending more time with them. I brought groceries, took my sister for checkups, sat next to her while she read. No one said anything. But every day was like a small battle. Not with illness, but with time. We knew that every day together had weight. Even if everything went on without changes, even if it looked ordinary. On the outside, inside it was priceless. My sister learned to cook new dishes. Her husband took pictures every evening. The pictures were simple: a plate, a book, a window. But in each one you could feel the value of the moment. Their everyday life became a chronicle of time that would not return. They no longer planned in years. They lived in days. And there was a new wisdom in this. Mom came to them more often. She brought fruit, made compotes. Sometimes she just sat on the couch and watched them live. She didn't interfere. She was just there. There was a peace in her eyes that wasn't there before. Maybe she realized that it wasn't always necessary to say something. It was enough to be there. When another month had passed, I saw their photo on social media. They were standing together against the background of an old tree. The sister held the book, her husband held the camera. The caption was short: "Living is a daily victory." And I believed that for them it was true. No one knew how long this balance would last. But no one was afraid anymore. In each new day, they found something that made it worth it. I simply stayed by their side. Without conditions. Without promises. Without calculations. I no longer needed to hear thank you. They had already said it all, with every action. And I responded in kind.